Hey Deb, how are you?
Hey Jeff, I'm good. How are you?
Great. Well, thank you for joining me on Indispensable Appraisers podcast. Happy Thursday.
Same to you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So let's jump right in it. What do you think in the evaluation space and the valuation industry? What do you think we're winning at?
I think it's great that we're taking a hard, honest look at some of the long-standing issues in our industry. Like first, addressing the barriers to entry that we've had for decades that have really kept us from diversifying in proportion with our population. So I think that's to be commended. And second, the work that's happening just to ensure that both implicit and explicit bias have no place in our valuations, in our industry, and the services that we provide to our clients. So I think those are both good that we're working on those issues.
Oh, cool. And what do you think, and again, I'm talking broadly with the valuation space, what do you think is our greatest challenges?
When you look at our industry as a whole, we're this ancient profession. At least 3,500 years ago was the first time that in recorded civilization that someone acted in a position as an independent appraiser. So what we do is incredibly important. But I think over the last 3,500 years, we haven't kept up with the modern advances that so many other industries have. So, I'm talking about technology. Yes, obviously, lots of people are talking about technology, very important, but also maybe something a little more fundamental to our profession and the people in it is this business model that is the foundation of our industry. This one appraiser to one appraisal business model. Not only does it not scale, which is, as you know, necessary to keep up with any kind of advancing economy, but it's so ingrained in what we do that it actually discourages appraisers from from seeking out and trying creative ways to do more and to do better business. For myself, this is obviously, this kind of entrepreneurial spirit is something that I have really embraced and very much want to try to promote within our industry. I have heard literally hundreds of appraisers between the one-to-one conversations I've had, as well as the discussion groups that I've been at, whether it's LDAC or other meetings of appraisal professionals. These are smart people. They have great ideas, and a lot of them, not all, but a lot of them really want to be able to apply themselves from kind of more of an entrepreneurial perspective. Like, how can we do more? How can we scale? How can I add to my business? How can I expand? What are the opportunities here beyond just what they've been taught, which is the one appraiser writes one appraisal business model? But I think that our industry overall has kind of done a bit of a disservice to this entrepreneurial spirit that lives in so many appraisers by keeping them honestly either afraid to try new things or simply feeling discouraged that there's not enough support. There's not enough, there's not really any mentorship, not really any forums or resources for the appraisers out there who would like to try to do more. And so I think that combined has really had a detrimental effect on what otherwise could have been an industry that could very well have advanced a lot more than it has today.
Great, great. So you're talking about entrepreneurship. So, leading into my third question of where do we go from here? How do you light up that entrepreneurship? You mentioned a few avenues of maybe doing that, but how does an appraisal mindset, whether they're a fee appraiser or a chief appraiser, do they even know they know what scale means, but all the things that scale reflects, which is a business model, how to do, how to grow, how to increase revenue, how to do a better job, all the stuff that comes with the word scale. Where does an appraiser start? How do you, let's say they hear somebody's watching this podcast and you're like, well, I think I want to be more entrepreneurial, but I feel kind of stuck in the widget making of appraising. What would you tell that person?
Wow. Well, that's a big question because, as I said, we're in an industry that um, it doesn't really encourage or support that kind of thinking right now. I think that there would be, and I brought this up, at different discussions, different conversations I've had. I brought it up at LDAC. If anyone is watching this who's seen me at LDAC, they will probably be able to attest. Yeah, I heard her say that. But I think that there's a huge opportunity for, continuing education to take a focus on appraisal business, because we're not just appraisers, we're business people too. An awful lot of us are business people. Like the overwhelming majority of appraisal firms are, kind of owner operated type operations. So I think that there's a lot of opportunity there for individual appraisers who are wanting to get into, to kind of be able to tap into this entrepreneurial spirit. I think the first thing that it takes is be willing to, and be ready and be prepared that when you step outside the box, there are going to be other people within our industry. Perhaps you could call them like the purists, compared to, perhaps those who might be a little more pragmatically minded. Those that are very purist, they might push back on you. They might challenge you. They might, you might hear things that kind of make you feel a little bit, exposed, or perhaps you're getting into something that might be a little risky because it's different. I would encourage those people, keep looking, reach out to other appraisers, other professionals who have done things that you can look at and say, I think they might have figured out something already. I'm going to reach out to them. I know from my perspective, I've spoken with so many appraisers who have come to me and said, how did you do it? How did you actually do this? And I've had lots of, jokes made about, the size of my courage to get to, to be able to build a company like this. And, really it took persistence. It took a lot of curiosity. It took a ton of conversations and working with, legislators, working with, legal people, different experts, use papians, all of that. It's like right now, this is what I'm saying. It's so hard to create anything different than what exists. Like the fact that I, built eval.com, where most appraisers would never have gotten it this far. Like the fact that it was so difficult and took so much time, I think is just part of this whole, it's representative of exactly what I'm talking about, which is essentially we have an industry that that kind of discourages people from trying to do something a little bit different. So I'm sorry if I rambled on that. Your question is a really good one, and I wish I just had a really great answer for it, but I just don't. It's such a foundational, kind of like lacking that we just have in our industry right now.
No, I think you did a great job answering that. Matter of fact, your journey really exemplifies that, right? And the entrepreneur journey, once you've made that switch, it is a wildly different mindset. In my own journey as Realwired, in my past was a commercial appraiser, did all the normal stuff. But when I made that switch to entrepreneurship, it really is much, much different. You view your, valuation is still an art, but you see it, to your point, as a business, right? There's a practical side of it. You also want to do a great job, but you also have employees, you have payroll, and that journey is super exciting. So you've that's what I was going with what you were saying, was your journey exemplifies that, right? It may be clunky and hard and whatever it took. Some of that could be just the normal entrepreneurial's journey. But I'm glad you stepped through that, because some may not know, eval.com, what you've done, why you did it might be more interesting to where you probably were that appraiser that was just doing appraising. So what made you want to do that? So if I could dial it back, going back to that, when you came up with the idea, what were you thinking of? Like, is it more of like, there's got to be a better way, or I see this as a product, that needs a go-to-market fit. I see a lot of demand that why don't, what, can you go back to that point and tell me that entrepreneurial spark when you had it, what were you thinking and why you wanted to do it?
Sure. It's an old story. I saw a gap in the market where I thought something should exist, but it didn't. And so I started to dig. Having, prior to eval, running, having my own boutique appraisal firm, very much like the traditional, appraisal business model. I started to hear about these evaluations from our local clients, our local lending clients. And what I was hearing was, there's nobody out there who can do them well. They're coming from, real estate agents, or we don't know who, from, all over the country. The quality is so poor that it's better for us to just do them in-house, which was a little like, what do you mean you're doing them in-house? That's a whole can of worms. But I just thought, okay, so there's this alternative valuation product out there that's being used a lot. Like, asking these clients, how many are you using? And they said, we use about 4 evals to every 1 appraisal. I thought, okay, this is huge. Why aren't appraisers doing them? Why aren't appraisers involved? Obviously, you have USPAP, you have state laws, you have different interagency guidelines that, come from, DC. So there was a lot there to kind of start sorting through. And obviously, very quickly, I came to kind of understand why appraisers hadn't gotten into evaluations. And it's because it's unbelievably daunting to try to understand the complexities, the contradictions, the minutia of, the tiniest little bit of wording that can change from state to state and user to user. And appraisers, we tend to be a pretty risk-averse bunch. So we just didn't get into it. But I thought, just because it wasn't there didn't mean that it shouldn't be there. So I just kept at it. And over the span of 3 years, I did research, conversations, exploring everything I possibly could before we did our first evaluation. And it was so immediately successful in our appraisal footprint that that was what got us thinking bigger. Like, this wasn't just a Wyoming problem. This was a national problem and a national opportunity. And so, it was another 3 years after that before we actually launched eval.com. So it was an enormous amount of work, still continues to be. Obviously, this is a very challenging industry, but, really it was just one of those old, tried and true hallmarks of, free enterprise and capitalism. You see something that should exist, but it doesn't. And so you go out and do everything you can to bring that to life.
Awesome. I appreciate the journey, because you've really illustrated what we're talking about, right? You actually asked why or why not, right? You saw a demand in the market, and then you ideated, how can this be done? And in your particular journey, there's lots of hurdles that you mentioned, but it started with, you asked, hey, I think we can do this better. You asked the why or why not. Why can't we do this? And you ideate it. And the third step, you did action, right? You actually did it. You have employees, you've gone through, you have your product, you've got technology. So you have done that journey. And I think that really illustrates exactly the whole point of what we're talking about, which is what you've done illustrates what other appraisers can do.
That's exactly right. Like there's no reason why there shouldn't be a lot of other appraisers exploring new and wonderful ways of providing more service, providing better service, and continuing to advance not only their own career, but our profession overall. There is so much more that can be done and should be done. And I hear these ideas and I meet these people, and I know that if we were to just encourage them a little bit and let them feel like there will be support here for those of you who want to think a little different and who want to like genuinely take steps to advance our profession.
And I hear what you're saying.
These great things.
Sorry to interrupt. I do hear if it's not discouragement, there's also not maybe encouragement, right? And I think that's what we could be lacking. I had a friend of mine bring up a potential product he's working on that would be outsourcing appraisal bias, like coming up with a certification, if you will, to prove if it's competency or if there's really bias, really have an outsourced product. So the banks don't have to worry about conflicts of interest. You can say, here's an appraisal, take it through your criteria to see, is this, again, competency? Is it really honestly bias? Because that's a hard thing to come up with, but it would be a new product. And I thought that was an awesome idea. And I think those, as an example, different ideas just need encouragement. And there's not, to your point, there's not a lot in our industry. And that's one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is if you look in any social media, and I don't mean just Facebook and just posting personal stuff, but having a voice in the valuation in the real estate space, especially CRE space, I see appraisers just not out there, right? So part of this, that's why it's called Indispensable Appraisers, is for people like you to take your time. Thank you for taking your time. And come on here and share your stories, because I do think some appraiser could hear you and your story and go, that is so cool. To take an idea from nothing, and now you're doing it, years later, and you're continuing to evolve in your entrepreneur journey. And I do think you set an example for a lot of people of this is what I'm talking about. And that's why I wanted to talk to you today. And I appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you so much for having me, giving me an opportunity to share a bit of this. And yeah, look forward to speaking with you again.
All right. Thanks, Deb.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.